Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Tears of Forrester, and I have with me James Taylor, and I'm really excited to have him. He helps people all over the world find their creativity and learn to use it. And so I'm really excited to learn from him today. So James, tell us a little bit more about yourself, your journey, kind of how you got started in all this, and where you are now and what you're doing.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on this event as well. I was originally going way back when I left school. I was a professional musician. I toured all around the world on playing on stages everywhere as a professional musician. And then I got really passionate about helping other musicians build their careers. And at that point, I started getting contacted by other musicians, other bands, saying, "Can you help me? Build my international touring and everything." So I started doing that, and then that took on a life of its own, really. And then I got more and more requests to help. Again, managing a lot of different artists. So I managed bands like Deacon Blue. I worked with members of the Rolling Stones, Jeff Beck, multiple Grammy Award winners and platinum sellers. And for the next really 10 years, I was an artist manager and an advisor. And then one of the positives, or you can look at downsides, is that every day I would be contacted by musicians and songwriters and creators saying, "Can you help me in what I'm trying to do?" And I only had so many hours in the day. So I thought, well, actually, what I'm going to do is I'll just create an online course. I initially started just doing telephone calls and helping people one-on-one and emails. And then I said, well, what if I just put this information into an online course? So I created that. It was the biggest thing I ever did. I made that available. That took on a life of its own as well. And then a couple of people picked up on what I was doing there. And one of the founding members of AOL, after this sold AOL, he said to me, "Would you come over to California?" At this point, I was in the UK. "Come over to California and help us launch lots of online music schools, online art schools." So I then moved to California, to Napa Valley, and worked in Silicon Valley, and really helping people who are great at what they do creatively, but want to create an income from it. So we launched 30 online schools in the space of 2 years. Lots of students all around the world subscribing to these online schools. And then after about 3 years of doing that, I was being contacted by what you may class as like non-creative companies. So oil companies and publishing companies, what kind of very industrial companies, all different types of business, yoga instructors, all different types of people say, "Can you help us do that? And train our people online." So then I kind of went out into my own thing, and the core of everything I've always done has always been about creativity. And whether that's working with a Grammy Award winner up on the stage, or when they're picking up awards and launching their albums or their campaigns, or that's been with a CEO of a Silicon Valley tech company or a large multinational, and how they can get the most creative culture in their organization, or develop new products and new services. So it's always been that. So that was my kind of transition, I suppose, going from being just fully being a creative, i.e. as a musician, and now what I consider myself today is I'm a creative, but I use my creative skills to help other creatives build their businesses.
Awesome. That's great. So tell me a time that along your journey that you kind of lost your vision, and you kind of weren't sure, and this is a personal journey, and you weren't, and then how did you move past that, I guess?
Sure. So when I moved to California, I got so involved in helping build all these online music schools, online art schools, and I was working with very successful people. What they did, basically get what was out of their head into a product that could be sold online, and I got really good at it, and we had a lot of success with that. But in that process of doing that, I was kind of getting away from what was giving me most joy, I suppose, because I love helping facilitate others to get their creativity in the world, whatever that is, whether it's in a product or a service as well. And I became vice president of that business, and I got further and further into like the management of that and growing and funding and everything that's involved in building a business of that size. And I kind of got away from the bit of what I love doing is I just love working with individuals and teams and senior leadership in companies, kind of get their creativity going and get that creative spark, whether it's ideation sessions or monetizing or maximizing their creativity. So what I ended up doing is I could have very easily, I was having a very nice life and living in Napa Valley, beautiful part of America. But I thought I'm kind of getting a little bit too comfortable here in doing this. I need to push myself a bit. So one day I sat down, myself and my wife, and we sat down and I said, I'm going to give myself a date when I'm going to leave the business, when I'm going to leave the company. And I set it for 3 months ahead. And we just did this at home. I just wrote it. I even had a certificate on it. You retired from this job on such and such a date, and I put it up on our refrigerator. And I said, okay, everything I'm going to do between now and that date is to help get ready, for leaving and going into the next chapter of my career. Now, one of the things, and maybe some of your viewers and listeners have experienced this as well. If you're in a senior leadership of a company, especially startups, you're not allowed to compete directly with that company for a period of time. Sometimes called gardening leave or non-compete. So I thought, okay, well, I'm not really, I don't want to necessarily go straight back into that type of business anyway. So what we did is we gave ourselves, we're very fortunate in the UK, we've got a home in Italy, and we love traveling, we love being all over the world. So we basically gave ourselves like a mini retirement for a year. And we just spent time in Asia. We lived in Asia. We lived in Vancouver as well. We've got an apartment in Vancouver there. And we just had a lot of fun. And I think what was important for me as a creative person doing that is it allowed me to press the reset button.
Yeah.
It allowed me just to take a step back and think, what do I want to do the next chapter of my life? I had success in doing these other things. Like, I didn't necessarily want to be doing that for the rest of my life. So by giving myself that hard date, and getting all my ducks in a row, getting, everything financially happening and making sure that I had some evergreen revenue streams so things would keep going even when I wasn't working. And then I could then spend that next year just thinking about what I wanted to do and learning something. And I think this is going to become more of people like Tim Ferriss, who I met before in San Francisco as well on a couple of occasions. He talks about this mini retirements. And I think we're moving to an age where people used to retire at 60, 65 and go and play golf, to where you will work maybe 3, 4, 5 years intensely on your project and your creative business. And then you'll have a year off. And that year off is maybe where you go and reskill, retrain, think about something, refresh yourself. And so I'm a big fan of those mini retirements. So I'm coming up to probably my second year of maybe a 5-year push on something just now. So a couple more years and I'll probably take another little mini break.
I love that. That's awesome. I think, it's so important to rest and to recharge. And I think our society is like, go, 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 go. And we forget, like, until it's like too late, we're like, in the hospital or something.
Yeah.
That we realize like, oh, okay, I didn't listen to my body. I didn't listen to myself. And I didn't give my mind and my body space to really think. So I love that.
And I think this is partly culture. I mean, I was brought up in Scotland and we very much have that kind of work type of work ethic. And then going to America, you also have that work ethic. There's that same kind of, okay, I need to get on. And I think there's something that we can learn from maybe some of the Northern Europeans and some of the other Southern Europeans as well, where it's finding that balance for yourself. And sometimes that balance can be just in your week, making sure that balance is in your week. That's part of it. But other times it could be, there's mini retirements where you're just going to go and refresh yourself. Or maybe once every 3 months, you give yourself that week or long weekend where you just kind of get away and you just recharge the batteries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I try right now just to prevent myself from burning out in this hustle that I'm in is I don't, work on weekends. And no matter how much stuff I have to do, and there's always a pile, I really try hard not to work at all on weekends. So, and that's good for me.
Yeah, there's always more stuff to do. There's always more emails, more tasks, and there's that great story. And I think there's a video out. My friend Jermaine Griggs, who's a wonderful marketer, lives in Orange County in California. He talks about this, where you may have heard this expression before, with and he does it visually. So if you can try and find the video somewhere out there, and he has this like vase, of a clear vase, and in it he puts some stones, large stones first. And then he puts like some smaller stones in, and then he puts some like pebbles, and then he puts some sand in, and he puts some water. And what the whole point of that was, you saying, listen, get the big things in first, get your major projects in that you are committed first, then the smaller ones. Then most times you're receiving emails, other people's priorities. It's not your priorities. So, the way you schedule your day and your week, get your big stones in, get big projects in that you are passionate about in first. Use the time to get in maybe some of other people's priorities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in your work, where do you see a lot of people getting stuck, and kind of what obstacles do you help people kind of work through?
Yeah. So there's another thing. I think especially with creative people that, in America, about 55% of the population consider themselves creative. Here in Europe, it's 45%. In other parts of Asia, where I speak a lot, it's a little bit lower than that, maybe 37% or so. So you can argue the majority of people do not consider themselves creative. I'm guessing probably, the audience watching this, maybe you do feel you have this creative. So you're in that kind of camp of considering yourself creative. Maybe you're a creative professional and already some way, or you aspire to do that kind of work. So for those people, if we think about there's 5 steps or stages of the creative process, the stage that they get most stuck on is the 4th stage. It's the evaluation stage. So often these people have no problems coming up with new ideas. It's how you evaluate which of these ideas should I pursue. That's the big challenge for them. Now, for other people, like earlier today, I was speaking to a group of lawyers and engineers. And for them, that's not the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge for them is maybe the earlier stages, ideation stage, coming up with new ideas, or it's the last stage, which is the iteration of the more innovative stage of things. So I think for most people, create people that consider themselves creative, regardless of what kind of creative work they're doing, they have got so many ideas, and they think, which one do I pursue? And then there's the danger that they try and do lots of different things, lots of individual things, but they never really master any of those things to a deep level. So when I work with those people, the first thing I do with them is just talk to them about a very simple story I heard once that I think is very powerful for creatives. And it comes from perhaps the least creative person you might think. It comes from Warren Buffett, the investor, legendary investor. And one day his pilot, he has a personal pilot, as you do when you're a billionaire. And his pilot came up to him and said, "Mr. Buffett, I'm thinking about what to do with the next 5 years of my life and my work. Any tips on goal setting and what I should do?" And the advice that Warren Buffett gave to his pilot is the advice I give to a lot of creatives, which the most important thing is around prioritization. So think for wherever your own creative work is, what do you want to achieve in the next 3 to 5 years in that work? So put together a list of, say, 25 things. So you've got this list of 25. Now, I would like you to circle the 5 most important things for you, the 5 projects that if you did nothing else, this would make your day. This would make your year, your 5 years. What are those 5 things? Now, here's the thing that I think most creatives get wrong. I think most people end up getting wrong. And Warren Buffett said to his pilot, he said, "So now tell me about your goals, your list." He said, "Well, and how would you approach that list of things?" He said, "Well, I would go and try to do the 5 things first. I would focus on those 5 things. And anytime I had left around it, I would do the other 20 things." And Warren Buffett said, no, that's not what you should be thinking. The way you should be thinking about it is those 5 things are the things that you will absolutely do. And that's all your focus is going to be on. The 20 other things are the avoid at all cost list. Because all these things will take you away from the core thing that you're trying to do. So as creatives, I think we first need to just take a step back when we have all these projects and ideas, and we need to find some way of just setting ourselves, those big 5-year things. There could be new ways, if it's about building your coaching business, for example. There'll all be new marketing things that are coming all the time, but get the core goal, the core outcome in there first. There's different tactics you can use to achieve it, and maybe some different strategy, but get those things in there first. Decide what those things are. And then after that, it's actually much simpler. When you come up with these new ideas, you're just going to go, how does this relate to my 5 things? How does it relate to that? And if it doesn't, avoid at all costs.
Yeah. I think a lot of creatives have that, shiny object syndrome, where it's like, ooh, I could do this and I could do that, and I could do this, but if I do this, then I'm going to miss out on this. And so, and then that gets you nowhere. And you're, back to where you started.
I think marketers, and I consider myself part what I do is a marketer as well, but marketers exploit that in people, especially creative people, because they know that there's a bright, shiny thing syndrome. And so, 1 month it's going to be webinars. Everyone should be doing webinars to market. Next month it's what's the latest one? Facebook messaging, instant messaging. That's the current one. A couple of months ago, it was surveys. So the problem is these things come all the time, and these things are marketed by groups marketing one thing at the same time. So you just have to, there's that expression, happiness is measured by the things that you leave alone. And sometimes you just have to go, that's really interesting, but that's going to be a distraction from what I'm trying to do. And just really dig into really, if it's, Facebook is what you're starting on your marketing first of your creative stuff, get absolutely dug into that, focus on that, become a master in that before you move on to YouTube or other platforms.
Yeah. Don't try to spread yourself too thin on all the platforms and then get overwhelmed. So can you go through the steps of creativity that you kind of take people through a little bit more in depthly?
Yeah, sure. So you basically got these 5 steps or stages in the creative process, and I'll talk through them in a linear fashion, but actually they're really iterative. You go back and forth really in reality. So the first step is the preparation stage. That's the stage where, regardless of what kind of work you're doing, you have to just absorb as much information as possible to learn in order to start coming up with new ideas related to that thing. So for example, if you're a visual artist, you will look at maybe the works of other visual artists to get inspired, to see how they're doing certain technique. If you're a musician, you listen to the albums of other artists, think, how can I do that? If you're an entrepreneur or small business owner, you'll look at other small businesses or other entrepreneurial businesses and say, well, how did they produce that? How did they manufacture that thing? So that's the first stage. It's the preparation stage. At that stage, the best thing you can be doing for yourself is doing it in a place with just very low level noise or quiet. You need peace and quiet kind of to do that depth work. There's different stages of the creative process, and each stage actually works in a slightly different environment. So for some people, this first stage is best done, I would say, in a quiet environment. You could do it in slightly like low level noise, like coffee shops. It can be quite good as well, but anything more than that noise, it doesn't work. It really is tough, I would say. So that's stage 1. Stage 2 is the incubation stage. This is the bit that a lot of people leave out. So they absorb all this information, I'm learning about this new thing, and then they immediately think that they have to go in and create something straight away from there. But what you're doing is all that information you're absorbing to the kind of front part of your brain, the top part of the brain here. You need to let it sift, go back for a while, put it to the subconscious, put it to the back of your mind, and let your subconscious do the heavy lifting for a while. So I will usually advise that if you're working on a project, if you're doing the preparation for it first, give yourself a week, 2 weeks, maybe a couple of weeks, and switch to another project for a while. Now, what's going on there is in the back of your mind, it's still sorting all that information and seeing the connections and thinking about, how does that relate to that? But it's not happening in a conscious way. Now, what will most often happen, and when you're doing in those stages, is if you do it right, then you'll start getting these little insights, some aha moments or light bulb moments. They are most likely to happen when you're doing some low-level physical activity. So when I say low-level physical activity, I mean, one of the reasons for our best ideas in the shower may be low-level kind of physical activity, but a couple of things are going on there. One is that time in the morning, our brains are fuzzy, kind of unwound, we're open to unconventional thoughts. That's the important part. Because if you try and continue trying to come up with new ideas in a conventional way, you're not really going to be generating anything new or novel. So one of the benefits, sometimes you have those morning kind of like insights, is because your brain is a little bit unwound at that point. You're relaxed. You've got the alpha waves kind of flooding through there as well. So you have that stage, which is that called the insight stage. And there's a couple of other things you can do as well. A couple of little tips. One is around color. University of British Columbia up in where I used to actually live very close to in Vancouver. They did a big study about what colors make you most creative. And they actually found the color red. If you have color red around you in your furnishings and your walls, around your computer, for example, when you're working, it increases your levels of accuracy. So it's very good if you're working on stuff that requires accuracy. It's good for that, to have that color red. However, they found the color blue actually allow you to generate more ideas, especially have kind of vibrant types of blue. So often we have this expression blue sky thinking, which you have the color blue around you. However, the University of Berlin did another study more recently, and what they found is that the color green, especially that vibrant green that you get out in nature, is the best color to have around you for coming up and generating new ideas. It's probably one of the reasons we can often get some of our best ideas when we're out walking or jogging out in nature. We get some of those ideas because we have that color green. So very simple. Wherever your workspace is that you're working just now, what color? I've got different things you can't see. I've got plants and I've got things. I've got that color around me as well. The second point is in the stage to get more insights is caffeine. One of the things I noticed moving from England, from the UK, moving to America, is we used to drink tea a lot, and there's much higher levels of coffee drink. Now, caffeine drinking is great for this preparation stage when you're absorbing all that information, and it's also very good for the last stage in the creative process. But in those middle stages, it's actually not that good. High levels of caffeine will reduce the number of creative insights that you have. And that's backed up by work that the University of Pennsylvania did, a woman called Dr. Martha Farrar, who said the number of insights that you will be dramatically reduced by having higher levels of caffeine in your diet. So if you want more of those creative insights, dial down the caffeine a little bit as well. So you start coming up with all those ideas, you go to the fourth stage, which is this evaluation stage. And that's kind of what we were speaking about earlier, about how you decide which projects to do. And there's different ways you can assess that. At C-School, my online school, we have different tools and toolkits that you can use to assess that. I mentioned one, the Warren Buffett model is an example. And then the final stage is that elaboration. So once you've decided what projects you want to pursue, it's the 99% perspiration. It's the stage where you create the minimum viable product, you test it, you do micro testing, and you can almost kind of go back to the beginning a little bit because there's things you don't know. So you need to kind of go back and prepare and learn more about something. Maybe it's in the marketing or the distribution or the sales or whatever the area. So that's the 5 steps or stages: preparation, incubation, insight, evaluation, and elaboration.
Thank you for sharing. That was great. I didn't know that about caffeine. So that's good. I quit drinking coffee a while ago just because I don't know why. I really like coffee. But so now I started drinking tea because I'm like, I
think it's a big change in the when I used to be more in the Bay Area in San Francisco, I noticed a lot of engineers moved away from drinking coffee to drinking tea. There's great places like Samovar Tea Lounges, for example, in San Francisco and Buena Park. And this is a general thing I've noticed more and more. And then also on the East Coast, there's people like Julie Burstein. I'm not sure if she's one of your guests, but she's a great speaker on creativity, and she gives a great TED talk on creativity as well. And she talks about every day when she gets up, she does her morning pages. That's her kind of tea time. She has a nice oolong or a nice tea. And it's not just about the tea. It's about the preparation of the tea. It's about just, relaxing into your day and getting the most from yourself.
Yeah. And I think tea kind of has the aromatherapy to it as well. And so there is that I really love about tea. But that's good to know about caffeine. What have you found to be the most profound thing as far as breakthrough when you're helping people, like that aha moment, like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Does it make sense? The question?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so I think one of the things we get caught up on a little bit here, I would say in the West,
Mm-hmm.
is we think that creativity has to be something created completely from new, i.e. never has existed before. And there's a reason for that. It's partly cultural, because we come from there's a Judeo-Christian society. You come from the idea that, you know, the world was created in 7 days, for example, in that world, and we're kind of, that's the way we're taught. We're taught to think about that something new has to come from nothing. That's not the way that other parts of the world think about creativity. In Asia, they come from a Confucius or Buddhist perspective, and the idea there is that that actually what the creativity is really about, remixing existing ideas in a new and unique way. So creativity can come from where you take two pre-existing ideas, maybe from very different fields, and you combine them together, and it creates a brand new thing. When you think about the iPhone, for example, the transistor in New Jersey, the cell phone was invented in Illinois, the World Wide Web was invented in Switzerland, venture capital funding was invented in New York. But bring them all together and add a little bit of design magic and great marketing, and you have the iPhone with Apple. So things aren't, and I think if a lot of people, creatives, if they just gave themselves a little bit of the breathing space to go, actually, it doesn't have to be this brand new, never thought of before. But what about if I take something I know really, really well, and maybe an area which you don't even think it has a relationship to it, and how can I combine those two things to come up with something which is truly unique as well? You know, we often hear this, people talk about the word new a lot. And I actually think what's more important is that it's unique more than anything else. And especially in a day where we're bombarded with so many different messages and things, I think your uniqueness in your remarkability is the best thing that you can be kind of doing. And that can often come from, you know, if you're a yoga teacher who is also into some, you know, painting, is a way that those things could be combined in an interesting way. I was speaking the other day to Eric Weil, who's a great motivational speaker. He was a visual artist and he's a motivational speaker. And so what he does now is he speaks on these huge stages, like rock concerts, and he paints live on stage in 5 minutes on these works. And so he combines his two passions, his passion for speaking and his passion, and he combines it into a unique way.
That's awesome. Yeah, and for me, I combined kind of my two passions for the arts. I have a background in music and in visual art, and I also have a background in the outdoors. And so combining the two, it came to a realization like, oh, I can combine the two. That totally could work. And when that clicked for me, I was, I got really excited because those are the two things that I love, to teach people how to find their creativity and to learn more about themselves through the arts, and then through the outdoors, like climbing and hiking and stuff like that. I think I'm really excited about. So.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you've got guys like Victor Wooten in Nashville and Tennessee area, who great bass player and who combines his love of teaching music specifically, and his love of nature, and he puts it together in these nature base camps, I think they're called. And I haven't been on it yet, but I know I've had Victor Wooten on my podcast, and they're really cool because they combine two things. No one had really combined it in that way before. So, you know, I think he talks about they walk through the woods and they're looking at the plant life and things, you know, around that and how that relates to music and evolution. And so, you can absolutely find that uniqueness and often that's combining two or more pre-existing ideas, which you already love.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I'll have to look that up. Nature Base Camp. I played upright bass all through my school years. So I'm definitely gonna look that up. That sounds super
great.
Fun. Yeah. So to close out, what would you tell someone who's watching this and afraid to start something new? They're in the beginning stages, or maybe they're done all this stuff and are afraid to restart. What kind of advice would you give those people watching this?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say as a creative, with those fears, you're not alone. Every great creative I've ever worked with, whether they're great award-winning musicians or authors or entrepreneurs, they all have the same fears that you're experiencing. They say, someone's already a bit better. I fear I don't know enough. I fear I'm too old to start. Elizabeth Gilbert, the writer, has this great expression for the perfectionism, which I think is especially the case amongst female entrepreneurs that I work with, creatives. You feel it has to be absolutely 100% perfect. And my wife's like this as well. And Elizabeth Gilbert said, really, perfectionism is just a type of fear. It's like a classy type of fear. It's trying to be all elegant when in fact it's absolutely terrified. It's like fear in Jimmy Choo's shoes. So once you recognize that you have all these fears, and these fears are there for, they're there for a reason, but then also recognize that every creative person that's ever done anything has experienced these same fears. Then you have to decide, okay, I'm going to have to over time build up and get over some of these fears. So the first thing I would suggest in terms of how you make a transition, let's say if you're in a 9-to-5 job you absolutely hate just now and you want to make that transition to that new thing. The first thing I would say is give yourself the grocery goal first. So don't go and do the heroic thing of going into your boss on Monday morning and saying, I quit, I'm out of here. That's probably not the best idea. Like I mentioned, I give myself a 3-month time frame in order to do the I quit, I'm out of here thing. So give yourself that, that first thing is get some income of some sort from that creative work up to a level where it's paying for your groceries. That's level 1, really. So that's great. You've got that level. And then maybe the next level is where it's paying for your groceries, your rent or your mortgage, those kind of costs. And then get to the next level again, where it's paying all your costs and it's giving you, there's profit, there's money you can put to savings and things every month as well. When you get to that stage, try and get there for about, 2 to 3 months. So consistently, that's the point to be able to go hand in my notice. And you can do them kind of a little bit at the same time. So you can, if you have a boss that's open to this idea, as you start to build up your income from your side hustle, like Chris Guillebeau talks about side hustle, then you can start to decrease your other gig, your day job, maybe try and get it down to 4 days a week or 3 days a week or whatever. And then they can gradually take time. And actually you may decide at the end of that, I actually really like my 9-to-5 gig. I really enjoy it. I just don't want to be doing 9-to-5 every single week. And I want to have time to do this other thing, which I also love as well. So it doesn't always have to be that you have to go and do the grand gesture of like leaving your job. That doesn't have to happen. As long as you just give yourself time, be sensible about it in that sense, which I know for creative people can sometimes, sensibility and things can be unusual, but just give yourself that, because this idea of the starving artist is a terrible myth that the media perpetuates. I don't know anyone that's starving that can really create at a high level. Starving people don't create a good level. You don't want to be in that position. You want to be in a position where you have some income coming through for you that can support you to do the creative work that you do. Elizabeth Gilbert, the writer, she actually decided she wanted to write, but she said to herself, the real creative writing, and she was doing some more journalism style as well. She said, I will never make my creative writing have to pay, have to pay for my entire lifestyle. I'll always have this journalism thing as well. Then times it just went on. She had Eat, Pray, Love and things like that became a success. She'd have to worry about any other gigs.
Right.
But just give yourself that little bit of runway. Be kind to yourself as you're building up your creative business.
Yeah. That element of be kind and that everything doesn't have to happen overnight. I think there's an illusion that things do happen overnight and that it's easier than I think people think it is, but I think there's a lot of, it takes an emotional toll. And so learning to be kind to yourself and, to manage your mind in that way. Yeah, it's crucial.
Yeah. I also have to ask yourself, and I think this may be an important question and I was talking to a friend of mine who's a YouTube star, big, tens of millions of followers on YouTube. And for the first 2 years, he was doing 3 videos a week, every week on YouTube, and no one was paying any attention. Because what he was doing is he was learning his craft. He was trying to get better at it. And then here's the important thing. I said, if you'd never had the success that you've had with YouTube, would you still be doing it? And he said, absolutely. Because I just love sharing my knowledge. In this case, it's music. I love sharing that with people. So you have to ask yourself this. If you never got any accolades for what you did, and even if you had to do some kind of other gig in order to pay so you could do that real creative thing that you wanted to do, would you still do it? If the answer is yes, then that's the work that you're meant to do.
Yeah, absolutely. that you would still do it, despite whether other people even never saw it. And I think, that there's something really profound about that, especially in our day and age where everything is meant to be shared and out in the world. And so learning to be okay with like, hey, if no one ever sees this, I'm happy, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, as long as you're sharing it and you're telling other people about it. But whether you get awards or accolades is like that's a completely different thing. And it's almost like another world that goes on. Many of those things are out with your control. What you do have within your control is ability to care and develop your craft, whatever your craft is as a creative person, and the ability to produce at a consistent level. Those things are in your control.
Right.
The accolades and the awards are not. So don't fret about them.
Yeah. Well, thank you, James, for taking time out of your day to interview with me. And if you want to share your free gift real quick before we close out.
Yeah, sure. So I have a thing called the Creativity Blueprint. So we actually, it's a 3-part series where I take you through, first of all, the stage of the creative process. We can cover that in the first one, but I go a bit more in depth. Then I actually look at, in video 2, I actually talk about creative blocks, because we didn't really cover that too much, but what happens when you just kind of get those blocks, you just can't, you're struggling to create. So I teach some techniques around that. And the third video is I answer the 10 most popular questions I've received over the years about creativity, living a creative life and the creative process. So that's all there for you as well. So I know we're going to have a link here on the page to be able to get that.
Yes. It'll be below us. So, I definitely check that out. I've definitely watched the videos, and they're really great. So thank you, James, for taking time out of your day. And I'm so glad that I got the opportunity to interview you. So I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you. And everyone that's watching, go out there, go create.
Yes, absolutely.